Well, for a little bit more on this, we're now joined via Zoom by Zimkhitha Macingwane, who's the head of communications at OR Tambo District Municipality. Zimkhitha, thanks very much indeed for joining us. A lot of people have been talking about KwaZulu-Natal, but these rains hit the Eastern Cape as well.
Good evening, Peter, and good evening to the viewers. Indeed, the OR Tambo District Municipality is one of the areas that have been hard hit by the torrential rains that we experienced as the country last week. The area that is worst affected here in OR Tambo is the Port St. John's local municipality, but I must indicate that all 5 local municipalities within our jurisdiction have been affected. And as a result, more than 2,000 households have sustained serious damages, and 885 households have then been left homeless. Our disaster and risk management teams are on site since we started receiving the first incidents that were reported to us, and they are collecting data. I must also indicate that during the first few days after the inclement weather, we were unable to get in touch with the people on the ground because the network was also affected. But around Monday, we started to receive more calls, and we do encourage other members of the community who might be saying that they have sustained damages to their infrastructure, but no one has reached them, to contact us on 047-501-6494 as our teams are continuing with data collection so that we're able to quantify the amount of the damage, but assessments are ongoing at this stage.
Is everybody accounted for at this stage, and have there been any fatalities? Hello, Zimkhitha, are you still there? All right, it looks as if it's frozen there, but we'll try and get Zimkhitha back on the line there just to get an update on what's been happening in the Eastern Cape. The President is visiting just to assess the damage himself for the situation there. And Zimkhitha is the communications officer for the OR Tambo District Municipality, telling us that all 5 municipal areas have been affected. Let's see if we can get Zimkhitha again. Zimkhitha, can you hear us? Hello, Zimkhitha.
Yes, Peter, I can hear you.
Right. Okay. So
Peter, are you still audible on my side?
All right. Yeah. So we were just asking, is everybody accounted for? Nobody missing? Have there been fatalities in the Eastern Cape?
There are 7 people who have lost their lives, but 6 of those members of the community that have lost their lives were affected in the KwaZulu-Natal floods. One young boy who lost his life is from Port St. John's, who is the 7th victim. He unfortunately drowned while crossing a flooded river, and his body was later recovered on Friday last week. Preparations for his send-off are still underway, and the district municipality has committed to assist the family because it's a destitute family that we are willing to assist so that they give a dignified send-off to this young boy. I must also indicate that 3 family members who had drowned in Pinetown, who are from Nyandeni local municipality, are also receiving assistance from the local municipality. A team of people from the Eastern Cape, in fact from OR Tambo, were sent to visit the family and see what kind of assistance will be needed. There are also 3 members of the family, of one family, who also who also drowned rather, who are from Ngqeleni local municipality. We're still getting in touch with that family so that we can see what type of assistance will be needed. So in total, Peter, at this stage, 7 people have been reported to have lost their lives, but only 1 person is a victim of the floods of the Eastern Cape, and the other 6 lost their lives in KwaZulu-Natal.
So what is the damage situation? Is it infrastructure? You've talked about housing as well. You know, we're seeing terrible images in KwaZulu-Natal. Is it a similar picture in the Eastern Cape in parts?
In some parts, it is a similar picture, as there were roads that were washed away. Road infrastructure was affected. We have about 32 roads that are completely inaccessible after those floods. We also have 11 health infrastructures that were affected. In one situation, a nurse's accommodation was affected and nurses had to be removed from that accommodation. Schools were also affected, but as I indicated earlier on, it's still early to say this is the total damage that occurred after those torrential rains. The assessments are ongoing, but we must indicate that the damages to the infrastructure and to the households have really cost us as the district municipality. But we appreciate that the Premier was here on Monday. We have seen various MECs from provincial government visiting our space, and we also expect the President to touch down to OR Tambo so that he can also see for himself the type of damage, and then a decision on what interventions will be brought will be most welcome by the communities here.
Again, one of the things that we saw in KwaZulu-Natal has been resources, trying to get to as many people as possible, help as many people as possible, but there just is such a need in terms of resources. Are you going through the same thing, and would you require some help from outside the province maybe even?
Peter, we are also not having enough resources, but I think what is really comforting is that even private institutions are willing to assist. And we also saw the gift of the givers last week, assisting the communities of Greens Farm area, where they handed over food parcels to about 300 people in that area. And also the disaster and risk management team of OR Tambo District Municipality handed over mattresses and blankets, especially to those who lost everything and have had to seek shelter from relatives and friends, because at this stage, no temporary shelters have been given to the affected victims. So the resources is a problem, but we are encouraging everyone who would like to assist to come forward so that we can put heads together so that we assist those who have been affected to restore their livelihoods.
What is the greatest need that people have on the ground at this stage? Again, I can only compare with KwaZulu-Natal because of what we've been seeing. Water was a big issue there in some parts because of the damage. What are you seeing in the Eastern Cape?
The greatest need is shelter, because people have lost their houses. But we saw today the MEC for Human Settlements in the province visiting Port St. John's, and some of the reports that will be presented tomorrow are going to shed some light as to how many people need their houses to be built from scratch, because we understand that others have just lost the roofs of their houses and would need only build the roofing material so that they can have their houses again. Some would really need a temporary shelter because they've lost everything. So shelter is one of the primary needs for the victims. Also, food is another issue, because people's groceries sustained damages, some lost everything, and food is another issue that they need. And also, Home Affairs is working closely with us because people lost their documents as well. So we are trying to join hands with every stakeholder so that tomorrow, when we deliberate on the report, which will be the 5th edition of the report, as we are continuing to put together the report as we collect the data on the ground, we are able to see the picture and then decide on what interventions will be needed. We are going to have a short-term intervention, Peter, a medium and a long-term intervention, because we must also highlight that in Port St. John's, the Greens Farm area is a low-lying area, which is always experiencing these floods. So there are also engagements with that community for them to be removed from that area, because when it rains, it really poses a challenge to their lives and also to their buildings as well. So there are also those engagements so that in the long term they can be removed completely from that area, because every year when we have such huge rains, then we start to see these areas flooding.
What about access to people in the more remote areas? Has that been a challenge?
The challenge has been in areas where the road infrastructure has been affected, but the local municipalities have dispatched graders to remove trees that had fallen on the roads, and work is underway. But for roads that have cracked and bridges that have been swept away, those need to be reconstructed so they will fit in the medium and long-term intervention of our assistance to the communities. However, we are in touch with the ward councillors who are in those areas, so that if there are any people who need to move from one area to another, we see how we can put hands together so that we don't have a situation where people are cut off completely from the outside world because of the disaster that took place in this area.
All right. Power, that's always a big issue in these kinds of scenarios. Has that been interrupted beyond the load shedding that we've seen?
May you repeat the question? You were disconnected a bit, Peter.
I was just saying that power is usually a big story in these kinds of scenarios. And I was just wondering if you've experienced extra outages beyond the load shedding.
At this stage, we did not receive any reports of any extraordinary electricity outages besides the load shedding. But the main thing that was affected in the first few days after the torrential rains was network connectivity, but that has too been restored, and we're able to connect with the communities.
All right. Zimkhitha, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. A little bit different talking to you as a government official and not as a reporter on the ground, but thanks for the update.